Rachel McKee, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Likewise, can you tell folks what keeps you busy in this beautiful world? And busy as in, like, how do you spend your time? Not necessarily like no hustle. We don't like the hustle here.
Mhm. Like my non-traditional work time. Is that what you're
Yeah.
asking? Yeah.
Yeah, or your work too, however that plays in. But um, yeah, how do you like to spend your time?
Gosh, I like to spend my time being outside as much as possible. I'm feeling a little winter worn right now. So that's the first thing that comes up. I really like to spend my time creating, and especially creating something that I feel like is going to move out into the world and benefit society or benefit someone as a whole. So that's my very favorite way to spend my time. And that gets manifested through my traditional job, through writing, through all kinds of different projects. Um, and I just love meeting different kinds of people. So,
Mm, I love it. I love it. Well, you and I have met because you just got done working on a really big project. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
yeah. So for the last couple of years, I've been working on bringing this project to life, and it's called Messages from Her. It's a 44 card deck and then hardcover guidebook that matches the deck. So it features like really modern and world changing women. So a few years ago, I was seeing a lot of Oracle and Tarot decks around. And I one day just had this idea like, why wouldn't I have one of these that would have real women in it?
Mm.
Um, and I looked around for one and I couldn't find one. So I decided to make one.
And the deck, it's gorgeous itself. And so, who's the artist that you collaborated with to do the portraits of these women?
Yeah, so her name is Jazz. She lives in Australia and she goes by Harley and Jay is her artist name. And she's amazing. I went through a few different illustrators, just like test projects with people before I found her. And I don't know how I exactly stumbled upon her Instagram, but I remember the moment I did and just being like, oh, this is my woman. I'm like really hope that she has the time and wants to take this project on because it wasn't a small project. It's
No,
44 illustrations.
yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about some of the women that you have chosen to be in the deck and maybe a few of your favorites? And
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to say that I have favorites because they're all really amazing. And, depending on my mood on any given day, a different one is going to be my favorite. But there are a few that I feel like people don't know much about. There's this woman,
Mm.
Jane Addams, and she, um, she was born into a really wealthy family and she didn't want to take the traditional path of like becoming a socialite. And she took her wealth and she bought this entire giant like building complex in Chicago and she went and traveled over in Europe and saw kind of different social movements. And she came back and she integrated these different ideas into this building complex that she bought by bringing like people from all different economic groups and races and different like immigrants. And so it was this whole complex where people could live in homes and apartments, but then it also had like, like a girls club and a boys club and after work learning for people that wanted to keep like moving up in their career, and a pool and an activity hall and a clinic. And like every kind of social service you can imagine was built into this complex. And then she did all of these studies based on her whole building, and that is what created the modern social services that we experience in our society. um,
Wow.
so, and she was like one of the most well-known women in the world when she died in I must have been in the first decade or two of the 1900s. But like this is a woman that fundamentally changed the way our world operates and the way we care for society in the United States that just didn't exist before she came along and did what she did. So it's like, it's just so impressive. There are a few people in particular that I'm like, wow, how did I not know about this person?
Yeah. Who's another one like that?
Irena Sendler is another one that I think is really amazing. I don't know if you've ever heard of her.
No.
Yeah, so she was in Poland during World War II, and she was a nurse. And so she went into the Warsaw Ghetto, which was the largest ghetto in all of Europe during World War II. And she went into people's homes. Like the Nazi soldiers didn't want to go into people's homes when people were sick. So she would go in under the pretense that she was going in to help them get better. And she would track all of the kids that were being raised and living in the ghetto. And then she snuck them out, like over 3,000 children out of the ghetto. And she renamed them and put them in families that were willing to protect them. And then she, I mean, it's crazy. She made up her own whole code language to track where, like what these kids' names were, where she had taken them, where their families were, like everything about them. And then she kept these records in all of these secret places. She was captured by the Nazis at one point and was sent to be killed. And then somehow someone broke her out. And then at the end of the war, she went back to all of these hiding places and found her records and found all of these kids, which is just like, it's unreal.
What a cool story. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. No, and it's not just, this deck doesn't just include historical figures, which is a piece of it that I really think is so cool. Like you've got like Queen Elizabeth and Marie Forleo and
Lizzo and
like, was Sonia Renee Taylor in there? Was that one? No. Okay.
No.
You've got a great body of women. And how did you decide who would be going in? Because there's so many amazing women in the world.
Yeah, that was hard. Actually have this giant spreadsheet of like hundreds of women. And, you know, this is the first iteration of this project. So I wanted to pick women. I wanted to pick a lot of women that were pretty well known so like, say, for example, you're not into women's history and you might not be into reading, or you might not be into card decks, right? But you love Beyonce. So you're like, I have to have this thing because I'm such a Beyonce fan. So I was really intentional about picking a wide range of well-known women that could pull people into this kind of world that might not normally be interested. And then I blended in a bunch of other women that represented, well, let me back up. Let me talk about their qualities. So each of them represent a quality, right? And so I wanted to make sure that when I looked not only at the specific women that I had chosen, when I looked at the qualities, it was like a really broad and like useful range of qualities for people. So it was a mix of like picking people that I feel really personally inspired by, picking people that are really well known, and then picking people that match certain qualities that I felt like needed to be represented in the first 44 qualities.
Okay, that makes so much sense. And it seems like it would be a very difficult task, but I hear a deck number 2 in your future.
Yeah, exactly. No, it says volume 1 on the side of the box and the book, because I'm like, I mean, I could just keep going and going and going with this.
Yeah. What was the research process like for you?
It was fun, actually. I thought it was really fun. I like researching. I don't think that I'm the kind of person that could research and write like a whole book about one person, but I eventually got into a little bit of a workflow where I would, like at the same time every day in the afternoon, I would sit down and I would like start with my sources and read through those and take notes in a certain way. And so I got really kind of like organized and intentional about how I was doing the research. Because I also noticed it was really fun, but then it would get kind of sleepy and boring after too long. So yeah, I just kind of created a system around it, and I really committed to bringing this project to life maybe a few weeks after everything shut down in March of 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. And so I just noticed it was really helpful for me as well to say, okay, at this time, every afternoon, I'm going to sit and work on this project, and I'm going to learn about these women, and I'm going to take notes and keep it organized in this way. It wasn't the most inspiring time in looking into the outer world. I mean, it was a really heavy time actually looking to the outer world. And so I felt like having the story, like learning the stories about these women's lives and working on this project was really helpful for me to kind of balance out everything that was happening in the world around me.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I'm curious one of the things that got me through the past 2 years has definitely been my creativity. So I'm curious what it meant to you to have a creative project to carry you through these heavier and just unprecedented times.
Yeah. I think for me, creativity feels like an energy that's like, that can move through me. And so when I'm being creative, it keeps things from feeling kind of stuck in my body. And I guess it also feels like there's some sort of connection to something greater than myself when I'm being creative.
Mm-hmm.
Like we live in this infinitely creative universe and this planet that's always creating and in these cycles. And so I feel like there's a way that creativity is like very functional and healthy and like fundamental for humans as well. And if you can kind of let yourself like get out of the nervousness and the doubt, it can be something that isn't just functioning to like make something, but it's just functioning to keep your system like in a natural, healthy state.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, creativity is everything. It's like the magic of life. So I know that if it hadn't been for my creative projects, it wasn't even about the making. It was just having something to, like you said, flow through me every day. It's like it works out, helps you clear the junk, trash of the mind out.
Yeah, and it definitely, like if I'm painting or writing or working on a creative project, my mind is calm, and I think I really need those breaks. Like I can have a very prolific, very active mind. It's like such a blessing at times and then so exhausting at other times. So having creative outlets that allow me to get out of my head and more in my body and just work with whatever is coming through it's a godsend.
Yeah. And you're a writer by trade, is that right?
By trade, let's see. No, not by trade, by hobby. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, is that your primary work then, or not?
Is writing my primary like traditional job?
Yes.
No.
Oh, well, talk to us. What is your traditional job?
So, for the last 11 years, I have a business and I do consulting and sales for ethically made clothing companies. So
Okay.
it's a very specific little like segment of the market, but that's specifically what I do in like a day-to-day traditional job kind of way.
For a company, or are you an entrepreneur? Talk to us about that piece of things.
Yeah, it's my company.
It's your company. Okay. So you started this company. How was that what you went to school for? Or I'm always curious about people's journeys into what they do.
Yeah, I did go to school for that. I started out going to school for art and a wide range of art. And then maybe I was going to go to art teaching, but then something felt like I wanted to channel that creativity into business in some way. And I was going to a city college here in Denver and they let me design my own degree. And I was like, great, I'll blend communication design and ethical business. And then I'll plug that into fashion, because when I was younger, I wanted to go into apparel design and fashion, all kinds of the parts of the fashion world. But I couldn't find anything redeeming about it at the time. So I just bailed on that kind of dream early on.
Wow. I love how you took what you were passionate about and made a job for yourself. That's incredible.
Yeah. It's funny when people, often the people will be like, oh, did you use your degree? Like, was it useful? I'm like, oh yeah. I made a degree for exactly what I wanted to do. And then I went into it.
Wow. What such foresight too. This is a conversation that my mom and I used to have a lot. My mom would always say for herself, she's like, I don't even know what's out there. Like, she's like, I'll hear about people who have these crazy jobs and I'll think, oh, that's so cool. How come that wasn't around? And so it's always interesting to me how we get to where we are, especially when we have to paint the path for ourselves sometimes.
Yeah. I look back and I'm like, oh, that was good. That was smart of me to go down that road. But it wasn't something that I was really like, I wasn't like pre-planning it and designing it that specifically. But it worked out, it's been good work. And I think, I've been doing it for 11 years. So I definitely feel like I'm ready to like provide benefit to the world in a different way. But in the meantime, it's still really great work. I feel like I'm doing something beneficial. It was a lot more creative in the beginning of doing it. So I think that's been a part of also the last couple of years, trying to channel more energy into creativity outside of that business. And a part of why I moved towards writing this book and making this project, because my traditional job was getting much more like traditional job-ish.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious with this project, Messages from Her, what has surprised you the most in the entire process?
You know what? I think the most surprising thing to me was how I felt learning about, like, I had this idea and I was like, wow, what a fun idea. I don't know why that's not out there in the world, but it was not, I didn't have any recognition of like how I would actually be impacted by using it and making it. So sometimes people ask me like all of the different things that were planned, like all of the different things that led me to making this project. And I always say one of them is maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, I had a yoga teacher ask me one time, like how I felt about being a woman and what I thought about women in general. And I was like, oh my God, I've never thought of that question. It just hadn't occurred to me. And so, like the impact that these women have had on me is really pretty amazing. And so that, like, I'm just surprised by how much their stories have made me feel a lot more proud and happy to be a woman. So that's once I started realizing that, it made me feel even more committed to getting it out into the world. But I didn't expect it at all.
So exciting. I'm curious. So you said you're a writer by hobby.
Yeah.
Have you always been a writer? How much writing did you do prior to this book? And what was the writing process itself, aside from research, like for you?
Mm-hmm. So I think I've always been a writer, like just in my life, in my personal life, through like journaling and poetry and loving digesting reading, and then like books and writing are kind of just magic to me and always have been. And I definitely like I did some writing, like I do writing for the companies that I work for to help clarify what they do. I did different kinds of writing classes in college. I wrote a lot when I was like a younger person in school. But in the last couple of years before I started working on this, I just pretty much wrote poetry and journaled. And so, I definitely had some like confidence hurdles to get over when I started writing this book, because I was like, oh my God, I'm writing a book. I haven't written a book. Like, how am I going to know if I'm writing things in the right like structure, and how am I going to check all of my grammar? And I also, for me, writing can be very much just like stream of consciousness. Things are coming out really quickly and kind of messy. So it wasn't like in the beginning, it wasn't the easiest thing for me to kind of get over some of the very cerebral doubts and ideas that I had about writing and how it was supposed to look, to just like let it happen.
Yeah, that's great for you to share with folks. I'm curious if there's been any part of the process where if you had known about it in advance, if you would have not forward.
I'll tell you, like the Kickstarter was like way more work than I had imagined. I like to compare it to when like my partner and I got a puppy a few years ago, and, we're going to get this puppy right. And we're like, this is going to be so much work. Okay, but we're ready. We know how much work a puppy is going to be. Like, we're here, we're ready for it. And then we got the puppy home. We got like the most intense, high energy puppy that we could ever have gotten. And it was like 5 times harder than we thought. That's kind of how, the Kickstarter has felt to me. Like I was like, okay, I'm ready. I know this is going to be a ton of work, and it's just so much more work than I thought.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I would go back and do it the same way if I was going to do it again, but it's also forced me so outside of my comfort zone in so many ways, so quickly, in ways that I would not have chosen for myself. So, it's that dance of like, would I actually go back and change it? Because all of these things, even though they're difficult, are probably really good for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I can relate to that so much. And I wanted to ask you about that because I have my first book coming out in May of this year, and it's called Little Failures. And the publishing company that I'm going through, it's a hybrid publisher between self-publishing and full-on publishing company. And the way you cover the costs of the publishing is through an IndieGoGo campaign. Oh. And I had a very similar thing. I funded in the first 24 hours, first 12 actually, I funded. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I'm so grateful that these platforms exist so that artists can get their work out into the world, that makers and creatives have a platform to create in a really unique way. And there's something about it, and I'm sure you're seeing this with the Kickstarter, it also builds community in a really beautiful way as well. And I mean, you and I wouldn't even be having this conversation if if you hadn't probably been working on the Kickstarter. So it's so fascinating and challenging.
It is. Both.
Oh, yeah. And in the publishing world, I was just telling this to someone else. Even now, the book is finished, but there's so many other additional steps where the publisher will slowly just drip them on me. And maybe there's a timeline somewhere that I missed that I haven't been looking at, but it'll be like, okay, you've got your manuscripts submitted. Now you need to reach out for early praise. So start emailing people for early praise. And then I'll be like getting all my early praise in. And it's like, okay, now we're going to write your author bio and summary. So you need to fill this out. And I'm just like, how many more of these extra steps are there?
Yeah. Yeah. I have also found that it's kind of like the more I step into the process and I'm like, oh, I just checked off these 5 things. It's like, but then I'm learning that there's more. So similar to what you're talking about, it's like, I didn't know what I didn't know. And every step I take forward, there's another few steps layered on because I'm also learning what I'm doing the whole time. I didn't know.
And it's absolutely invigorating and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely appreciative for everything I'm learning. I think the pace is a little challenging for me. Like I'm not used to like moving so quickly and growing outside of my comfort zone all at the same time. Like it feels like just the volume and the amount of time that I'm spending outside of my comfort zone and the amount of time that I'm spending really like working hard to bring it to life. It's like a little bit unnatural for me.
I felt that way, as I've been feeling that way as well. And I'm glad I didn't see the whole staircase at the beginning, Yeah.
Because you might not have done it. I probably would have been like, oh, that's going to come with, like, if someone was like, okay, when you do this Kickstarter, you're going to have to be doing this much on social media. You're going to have to be doing like podcasts and interviews. And I mean, not have to, it's lovely, but like, I would have been like, I can't do all of that, So here I am.
And here you are. And I'm so glad you're here. I'm curious what else you would like to share with our listeners. I'm not sure. I'll just say this as the listeners are listening. I'm not sure when this episode is going out. So it might still be in the Kickstarter time period. So if it is, we will be sure to link to that. If it is not, how can folks after that period, how will they be able to purchase or get in touch with you?
Well, I have messagesfromher.com is the domain. So that's pretty straightforward. And that has all the links to, if the Kickstarter is still going, there will be a banner that links you to the Kickstarter and there's email info and all of that. So that's probably the most straightforward way. And, assuming all goes to plan, the first print run will be here in August, though I'm airing in some copies early for a few select people that want them early. So, going into the fall and holidays, it'll be available for people to purchase, which I'm excited to have it for holiday because I think it's a good, it's got gold on it. It's like, it's really ready for the holiday season. So
it's beautiful. The deck is beautiful. Yeah. Well, anything else you'd like folks to know?
I mean, I would say just keep making things as they're moving through you, and don't worry about where they're going to go. Like figure that out later. Just keep it moving.
All right, my final question for you is, how do you live a life of abundance?
How do I live a life of abundance? I think I try to just be grateful for everything that I have with consistency, like a consistent gratitude practice. Like I wake up and I do gratitude journaling before I get out of bed every morning, and to just kind of try and soak that in and remember all that I have. Because it's not so much about the volume that you have, or what, like abundance in a specific, easy to define way. I think it's about really being able to feel it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for birthing your creative project into the world. I'm excited to get my hands on my deck. And we're so happy that you're with us today.
Thank you.